You guys remember this? What's up? I will tell you all. Wait.
Then
It's gonna stop me. I'm gonna keep coming back. Why? Just
stop this.
what the hell is this? Right? Coincidence? I think not.
Feet. Whatever happened to someone saying that there can only be up to 3 line pieces at a time? That was 4 in a row. You really think people do that? Go around the internet telling lies?
There's a lot to talk about today. Now, one thing that I'll say before we start talking about all this stuff that we're going to be talking about today, a lot of people have, even just in this chat, in the 10 minutes I've been live, have been acting like some bozos, being really rude about their opinion and all this stuff and everything, insulting people, calling people names. I need everyone to do the thing where they listen to the streamer and only interject when it's the right time to do so. And I think at first, ideally, you listen, and then after you listen, then you speak. Is that fair? Fastest be nice ever. Preemptive be nice is a big deal. The preemptive be nice. So I have a lot to talk about. I am going to preface a couple of more things, okay? One thing that I'll preface. I am a gray judge on D. What does that mean? That means that I act in the duels with the same level of authority as an assistant head judge. An assistant head judge would like a YCS or something like that. Meaning, if I issue a ruling, the ruling that I issue is final. I can't be appealed. However, I don't have any high level of authority on DB and stuff like that. Heck, I can't even permaban someone. I'm not even able to permanently ban anyone on the platform. I can freeze them for an extended period of time, and then I can take it to one of the gold admins, the head admins, and they can permaban someone. I, as a great judge, do not have the authority to permaban someone. So I can't be appealed in the duels that I take, but I don't have any administrative features and functions. The only thing that I, a gray judge, has above the green judges is I can see if someone's ban evading. The other thing to keep in mind is that all judges, all levels of judges, are able to handle reports that are on the forums. So we're going to start with what happened, and then after we see what happened, we're then going to talk about the aftermath, the responses that people have, and a lot of people have had extremely bad responses, is the way that I'll put it, in the sense that I think some people are interjecting where they shouldn't be interjecting and stuff like that.
Crash.
Whatever. Divisive for sure. Let's show you what happened. Last night, Dyer posted this on X.com, the Everything app, Twitter. Cool platform, slur warning. As soon as it happens, Dyer is playing a game of GOAT format. I don't know why you would ever do this. But Dyer goes, gets rock bombardmented, dumped, like, it's like burn 500 or some bullshit. Normal Cyberstein, and then the opponent says, and there's a world we might see it, ooh, okay, so it is censored. They said, ooh, an N-word hard R, straight slur. The reason why it's stars or whatever is because I have a Twitch plugin, not Twitch plugin, a DB plugin that I have a list of words that get censored so that I don't get in trouble on stream and stuff like that. So this happens, and then Dyer immediately calls a judge. No communication or nothing. Frame 1 calls a judge. And then Blue says it should be an easy win, typo, nicer, continue on, sorry I'm on laptop, all this stuff. So he's going on about this whole thing, that this is, you know, it's a typo, it's a mistake, like I didn't mean to type the N-word hard R perfectly, and all this stuff, and everything like that. And then Blue is saying that Dyer is slow play. 1x inappropriate judge call, player are you there, hello player are you there, Dyer is not responding. To my understanding, this goes on for all of about 10 minutes, until the point where the judge joins, and then the judge joins says, I issue. So the opponent drops an N-word hard R, Dyer just calls judge, and then proceeds to say nothing until the judge arrives about 10 minutes later. And then Blue says, hi judge, player's AFK. Red says, well, Dyer says, hi judge, my opponent used a slur. Also slow play. And then it's saying that it was an accident, sorry, I'm on laptop with mousepad, which I don't see why being on a laptop with mousepad
doesn't make you accidentally say an N-word on a keyboard.
Nothing for 10 minutes. And I'll explain why the judge asked this. So, there is a rule on Dueling Book where you're instructed as a player that if whatever happens in your call, in your duel, doesn't affect gameplay, like the opponent saying pretty much anything, doesn't hinder your ability to continue playing the game. The reason why that rule exists is specifically because we don't want people calling the judge for ridiculous reasons and pausing the game to do so. When the pause button was first introduced, the pause button exists for one reason. It doesn't exist so that you can pause it to, like, sit there, wait for a judge or anything like that in a situation like this. The pause button exists so that if your opponent makes an illegal play and then you are calling a judge to correct the illegal play, you can pause the duel to make it so that your opponent doesn't continue with the game state to the point where it's damn near impossible to repair. So the pause button exists primarily to make judges' jobs easier. But it also exists in order to facilitate a player pausing to communicate with their opponent when the opponent isn't being responsive or anything like that. So the pause button isn't there to pause the duel if there's a situation that happens that doesn't hinder gameplay. Now, I can understand why in this situation Dyer did this, and why a lot of people think, well, you wouldn't want to continue playing against someone who just dropped a slur, which is true. I don't disagree. However, the rule exists because primarily you don't get calls for someone said a slur, you get calls for Snowflake saying my opponent called me a noob, and then they're going to be pausing the duel for that. So the rule, the same as any rule, whether you see it on DB or you see it like at a YCS or in Konami's tournament policy or anything like that, every rule is intended to be taken with a grain of salt and open to interpretation by the judge. The rule is not intended to say, hey, you shouldn't be continuing the duel, or you shouldn't be pausing the duel or whatever for something non-gameplay related. For something this egregious, that doesn't apply here. The reality of it at the end of the day is that rule exists so that if someone pauses the duel because their opponent called them a noob, and they pause the duel for 20 minutes, we can punish the person that's basically calling and pausing for no reason. If you're gonna pause the duel because your opponent called you a poo-poo head, I'm sorry, but that's ridiculous. There are multiple ways that you can go about this, okay? And I'll say, Dyer did not choose the best way to go about it, and I know a lot of people dislike that. The best way to go about it isn't to pause the duel, call a judge, and AFK. The best way to handle this, which is the way that I think Dyer should have handled it, is if your opponent says something like this, you, as the player, should leave the duel and report the player. And I know a lot of people dislike that. They dislike the idea of, oh, well, why am I going to give them the win and all this stuff and everything? I think that you should leave the duel and report the player. And to anyone that's going to say, but my rating, if you leave the duel, report the player, and the judges deem that the player, what they did, was actually something that you can punish for, they can cancel your duel after the fact and give you back your rating points. They'll give you back your rating points. You get it back. And for context, in this situation here, this duel that Dyer had, Dyer ends up leaving it, not leaving, but Dyer gets issued a game loss, which I'll talk about after. This match has been cancelled after the fact, and Dyer has gotten their rating back for this duel. You should always, in a situation like this, instead of just sitting there, you should leave and report. Now, let's talk about what actually happened and where the mistakes took place. So Alexis asked, what did you do? Why did you do nothing for 10 minutes? And then Dyer says, because I'm not going to play with a racist, which I think is a reasonable response. And then the judge says, that isn't an acceptable reason to just AFK. Now, I know that a lot of people want to be really quick to shit on the judge, and I'm going to tell you guys right now, I'm not cool with that. Very much not cool with people just shitting on the judge. This isn't an example of a judge supporting racism or anything like that. This is a situation where a judge is reading the rules and attempting to apply them black on white. The judge here isn't supporting racism. Like, I've seen a lot of people online saying this judge is supporting racism. The judge was applying what the DB rules say, black on white. And I'm going to show you guys the DB rules so you can understand what exactly it was that they were applying here. And I'm not saying that I agree with their call. What I am saying is that they were applying things as they read them. So if you look at harassment here, it says repeated use of offensive language, comma, use of slurs or threatening physical violence. Physical violence or deplorable conduct. They read this, and I know that a lot of players, as well as judges and all this stuff, and even just users in general on the website, they don't understand what this rule is meant to say. If you read this, just in, like, one pass through, it reads as repeated use of offensive language, or repeated use of slurs, or repeated threatening physical violence or horrible conduct results in a harassment freeze. And it's been like one of those like Mandela effect things, where for a lot of people on the platform, it was believed for a very long time that if you just said one slur or whatever, you would get a warning.
Didn't know what happened.
And then it's only after you do it multiple times that you get upgraded.
Red heart emoji.
You know what I mean? Which is not the case and was never the way the rule was intended to be applied. For anyone that has watched my judge calls, even I have said this, because prior to today, I also believed that. There were some situations where I would take a judge call and the player would call their opponent like the same thing that UK people call a cigarette, and I would be forced. I was like, I have no choice. I have to give them a UC minor because they only said it the one time and they don't have a history and all this stuff and everything. And I would always push back against it. Every time that happened on stream, every single time I say, I don't agree with this, but that is simply how the DB rules are written. So even I misunderstood the way this rule was intended to be applied. Now, one issue that I'll say about this, and one thing that this judge should have done, is this judge should have checked the player's history, because the player does have an extensive history of doing bad things, and I think that is one mistake that the judge did. So I'm not allowed to show you guys this, okay? Again, I'm going to show you anything that I can. I'm not allowed to show you guys this, but I am allowed to tell you that they have had multiple UC minors for a lot of things, and because they got multiple UC minors for a lot of things, genuinely, if I was in that call and they said that just the one time, I would have checked their history, I would have seen that they had a UC minor for doing a lot of other things, and I would have frozen. And I think that that is where this judge made a mistake. I think this judge didn't think to check the history and just assume that it was an isolated one-time use or whatever and all this stuff, and they just mishandled that. Per these rules, I think it is not reasonable, but I think it's to be expected that, especially with what the old rules were and all that stuff, that if a player or judge didn't know, they should have known but it's a mistake. Do I think that the judge is supporting racism, or that the judge is racist, or anything like that? No. And the rules are, and they have been clarified behind the scenes, okay, that saying slurs in any capacity is a freeze. It is a freeze. So to anyone that's saying, oh, so people can just hop into a call and all this stuff and drop a slur, no, they can't. The call was handled incorrectly. Something like this right here, in the moment, should have been a freeze. Again, this is not censored on the actual website. It's censored because of a plugin on my side. So, when the judge said here, this isn't an acceptable reason to just AFK, they are wrong. They are wrong about that. Well, they're not wrong about this, per the current rules that state that you're not supposed to pause the duel and AFK for non-gameplay related issues. Per that rule, sure, they're technically correct that you're not supposed to AFK for this, because technically, the way you're supposed to handle this is you're supposed to leave the duel for the player and just report on them. But I don't fault Dyer for not doing that, because I can understand that if your opponent says something like this, you don't want to deal with that. Moving on. Blue says, I'm black. If it helps, brother, I'm not a racist. Which isn't okay. Saying, like, I'm going to be so real. If you're dropping the F slur and you tell me you're gay, I'm probably still going to freeze you. I'm going to be so real with you. And then Green says, consider this your only warning. You do not stop gameplay for non-gameplay related issues. You can call a judge, but the game is expected to proceed. Again, the only reason they are saying this is because this is what the rule is. The rule is, but this judge failed to use common sense and say, you know what, this one's pretty fucking egregious. I can understand why you did so. The judge is instead choosing to just follow the rule black on white, which they should not have done. So, given a UC minor warning here, you're not allowed to say things like that. So again, the reason why they gave a UC minor is specifically because they read this as
why are you saying by the black and white?
In order to be given a harassment penalty.
In D&D, we call this kind of behavior of rules lawyering by the letter.
For a long time on
instead of
that was the case. The
as
rule was changed about
intended.
a year ago.
Rules as intended versus rules as written.
Super made aware of it, so I can understand why it happened. Then he said, I have a tiny laptop with a small keyboard and all that stuff, and Dyer says a UC minor. That's it. And then they say, he was calling your deck the word, not you the person. This one, there's no excuse for it. That's stupid. There's no excuse for that one. That one is really dumb. I think it doesn't matter who the fuck you're directing the word at. Genuinely, whoever the fuck you're directing that word at, it's a problem. So I can understand why people flame for this one. I think if there's any sort of criticism to be had, it's, hey, this one was dumb. Don't do this one. Continuing, Dyer saying, judge, be serious. And then the judge says, I am, now please proceed. The way the judge views it is a way that I also kind of view it. After I've given my ruling, I don't want to be arguing with the players. Okay? I don't want to be arguing with the players after I give a ruling. When I give a ruling, I want to just move on. You know, it's just like, hey, the ruling has been given. If you disagree with it, you can either appeal, or you can take it to the forums after the duel. I've issued my ruling, please proceed. Dyer says I would like to appeal. Now, here, the judge has a very interesting response, is what exactly are you trying to appeal? Which I think is a genuine question that the judge is asking here. And the reason why is because, let's say, for example, the judge here has issued blue player a UC minor, and has issued Dyer a warning for AFK, basically, for stalling, for pausing the duel, all that stuff. So I don't think the judge is in the wrong for asking what it is that Dyer's trying to appeal, because depending on what Dyer's answer is, the answer the judge will give will be different. It's either, I'm appealing the warning you gave me, I'm appealing the warning you gave my opponent, which realistically, if you're trying to appeal the warning that your opponent was given, what, do you want the head judge to come in and not give the opponent a warning and stuff like that? I understand what Dyer was going for here, but what Dyer's trying to do is appeal to get a higher judgment, which you can do in certain situations. In this situation, not so much. So I'm just going to skip what Blue's saying, because the whole time, Blood is just waffling. He's just saying random stuff. So Dyer's saying the fact that this is getting the most minor warning possible rather than a freeze. A thing that I will say, and a thing that I don't find cool that players do a lot towards judges, and I'll take the time to state that, is a lot of players think that what their opponents do a lot of the time warrants a higher punishment than they got. I agree with it in this situation, But you gotta understand that from the judge's perspective, we get appeals like this constantly of like, I feel as though my opponent should have gotten a higher punishment, therefore I'm going to appeal, and 99.9% of times that this happens, it's for some dumb fuck reason. So again, I think that this was an instance where the judge kind of autopiloted a little bit and was like, hey, appealing to get a higher punishment or something like that, or you not agreeing with how egregious the punishment was. I don't fault the judge for being like, hey, this isn't necessarily something that you can appeal for. One thing that I think the judge should have done is the judge should have at the very least checked and asked if anyone was available for an appeal, because I legitimately think that if someone had checked in and watched this, the call probably would have gone a little bit different, and all that stuff would have been better worded as they received a UC minor instead of a major instead of the punishment itself. No, because again, you even at a YCS, if you go to a YCS and your opponent says something that you think probably should get them disqualified or something like that, and the judge rules that it's just a UC minor, you can appeal it, but more often than not, it's not gonna go anywhere. So on DB, we take creative liberties when it comes to things that you realistically can't do exactly identically to a YCS. There's not always a lot of judges online. It's very rare that there's more than one judge available at any given time. So a lot of the times, judges are allowed to deny appeals that they don't personally deem to be something that could be overturned, specifically because it's extremely rare that you actually get another judge to be available to come. That's like a big thing. Dyer, what time did you play this at? Was it around like 8 or 9 p.m.? While I think that the judge should have allowed an appeal, I don't think that them denying the appeal on the grounds that you can't appeal in order to get your opponent a higher punishment is necessarily wrong per dueling books rules. Why aren't there more judges on DB? Do you want the real answer? Because 99% of people on the platform don't know enough about rulings to be a judge on DB. The reality of it is the majority of the people that apply to be a judge on DB don't pass the exam. Like, I'm not even gonna lie to you. Like, I think the exam requires that you score a 90% on it because you need specifically people that know their fucking stuff in order to take calls. The reality of it is most people don't know enough about rulings. 85% is required. Yeah, there you go. So Dyer's asking, why is it a UC minor rather than a UC major judge? In your judgment, in issuing the warning, why is that the punishment you chose to give? And then the judge says, Dyer YGO, please proceed with the duel. You are not allowed to appeal a lack of punishment. I think the judge handled this incorrectly. Should have answered Dyer's question. Honestly, if I was in this judge's position and that is what I had ruled, I probably, if I was that judge, would have said, because the rules of DB state that, it's a repeated use that warrants a higher punishment or something like that. I genuinely believe, and Dyer, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, that if the judge had said that to Dyer and said, hey, I personally don't agree with this, but the rules of DB state that it has to be a repeated use or something like that, if that was the judge's belief of what the rules were, I feel like Dyer would have either said one of two things. Dyer would have either looked up the rules and specifically said, that's not how I read it, or she would have said, okay, I don't agree with it, but if that's what the rules of the website are, I'll simply report after the fact. I would have tried to argue the spirit of the law mattered more than the letter of the law. Yeah, but then at that point, I think that if you're trying to heavily argue with a judge like that, I think the judge is well within the rights to tell you, just continue with the duel and DM me after the fact. That's the thing that judges do a lot, by the way. If you want to argue with the judge about a judgment, and the judgment isn't going to be changing, I don't think that the player should be arguing with the judge in the moment. I think you continue with the duel and all that stuff, or whatever. You just take the judgment on the chin, and then you discuss with the judge after the fact. All judges are people, okay? They can make mistakes, but they'll also explain things to you.
Ain't that the biggest problem,
eh? In the middle of the duel, being argumentative is never a good idea, because realistically, judges, again, there's only ever one judge online, and there's a ton of calls to take and stuff like that. For the record, I'll say this because I think a lot of people think I'm playing defense.
People don't like people
on the spot, and
when it comes to situations like these, people like to just
I don't care if they have a history or not.
Want to show that the people who are helping them aren't
even if they've
even
never
people.
had warning prior or anything. If you pull up into the chat, you drop the hard R, I think you should get banned. Perma. Deadass. So anyways, the judge tells Dyer to continue. Dyer says, I'm asking you to clarify. In this situation, the judge is under no obligation to clarify further. They've issued their ruling and all that stuff. They're giving Dyer 1 minute to make a play. I think that if the judge feels as though that they ruled correctly, they're well within their rights to tell the player to continue. I think that the way the judge went about this was really bad. I think in this position, I would have said something more along the lines of, hey, this is just the way the rules are on DB. If you want to argue or talk about, like, the philosophy behind the rule or anything like that, feel free to DM me after the duel, but this is not the place to do it. And I think in that situation, anyone reasonable, Dyer is reasonable, Dyer probably would have felt upset to some degree, but not to the degree that she felt being treated the way that the judge was treating them here. I think that the judge went super brick wall in this situation and definitely shouldn't have. I think the judge absolutely should have just said, hey, whether you agree with this or not, this is what I'm ruling. Please continue. You can DM me and talk about this after the fact and all that stuff. Dyer's saying you've not answered me, so I think that this is a situation where you have two hard-headed people that are kind of clashing over here, and I think that created a really poor environment. So anyways, I'm asking for your reasoning on your ruling, and the judge issues Dyer a game loss, which you're supposed to do as a judge. If you give a player a certain amount of time to do an action and they just don't do it, you give them a game loss for non-compliance, which is what the judge did. Game loss for non-compliance. And then Dyer proceeds to go, okay, now please answer my question. They were sent to side decking. The judge is saying 3 minutes to finish siding. Dyer continues to argue, and then the judge says, I've already explained, they didn't call you the word in question, they were calling your deck the word. Horrible argument. This one's a horrible argument. I no defense of this one. Awful argument. Absolutely awful argument. There is a difference? No, there is not. Still not.
No, there is not.
Acceptable, but there is a difference. Now finish side. I think this one's dumb. I think if there's any amount of criticism to be given to the judge, it's that, and that they just handled the call poorly in general. And then Dyer says, Judge, you know the difference does not matter. I know you're not stupid, and I know you understand context clues. So why are you going by the letter of the law rather than the spirit? And then the judge says, 1 minute left, I suggest you finish siding. People were saying that this is very hostile. I'm going to be so real. I speak in this exact same way when I take judge calls. I think that being very direct with players in a situation like this is a very good idea. So I don't fault the judge for saying to the player, I've given you 3 minutes, you have a minute left, I really suggest that you finish siding. I don't think that this is hostile. I can understand why some people take it as it looks hostile. They're moving the duel along. I also speak to players like this when I'm in a situation exactly like this. So I understand. It only reads as hostile because of the rest of the chat log. And then they issue Dyer another loss, and then Dyer says, I hope you improve as a person, Judge. The people in your life deserve better than this. And again, I don't think that the judge as a person is someone that you should be attacking here, because at the end of the day, I do not think that the judge was advocating in favor of racism or anything like that. They just applied the rules of the website incorrectly, thinking that they were applying the rules of the website correctly. So I can tell you right now, okay, I'm going to tell you guys this, and I need you guys to not lose your fucking shit. The judge in question has not been banned. The judge in question has not been removed from the website, that they haven't lost their judge role or anything like that. They have been spoken to. They have been explained that the way that they handled this call was incorrect, and they've been explained the way that they should have answered the call and should have handled the call the correct way. And the reason why is because the heads of the website, and again, this is not my discussion, this is not my decision or anything like that. I'm just letting you know what fucking happened. The judges didn't deem it as the judge was excusing racism or being okay with racism or anything like that. They viewed it as a situation where the judge misunderstood the rules of the website and the way to apply them. They were explained the rules of the website and the way to apply them, and why the way that they ruled it was incorrect. This Alexis person, if I'm not wrong, have been a judge for less than a year. If I'm not wrong, okay? I don't actually know how long they've been a judge. I believe they've been a judge for less than a year. So I think that it's okay to be making mistakes. I think that it's unfortunate that the mistake was what was made here. So what is the aftermath of all this? What is going to happen after this call? What happened is that the blue player has been banned. They are banned on the website. They are banned. Okay, they are banned. I believe this is a permanent. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure it's a permanent. They have a history. They have a very, very long history. It is permanent. Awesome. So the thing with this player, right, by the way, is they're a very clear troll. It's so fucking obvious that they're a troll. And so I genuinely believe that the judge should have, understood that. It was very clearly a troll and all that stuff. I think that a lot of people are looking to the judge as the bad guy and all that stuff, when the reality of it is, it was a person that made a mistake. And it's not a mistake that was falling on deaf ears, if you will. The website, the heads of the website, I should say, are going to be rewording the way that that's written to make sure that it is perfectly clear for everyone that slurs are not allowed. So I think that all this has actually led to things just being more clarified. The reality of it is that things just weren't clear enough. I think a lot of people are just going straight to DB is a Nazi website run by Nazis or whatever. I'm gonna be very real. I've seen that comment, and I don't appreciate that. I don't appreciate comments like that. I don't think that's cool. Because the reality of it is, no, the judges aren't Nazis.
That's just
No,
how
the
people
heads of
on the
DB
internet
aren't
talk, man.
Nazis or anything like that. I think that using words like that is extremely bad, and anyone that uses words like that needs to fucking chill. But the other comments, I'm just gonna look at some of the comments here that I want to talk about. Nova said, I don't know why anyone uses Dueling Book, bro. Any Yu-Gi-Oh sim with a chat function is a disaster. I'm gonna be so fucking real, man. I don't appreciate Nova posting this, because Nova doesn't use DB, probably has never played on DB, and the reality of it is that DB is actually, and I know that a lot of people disagree with it, it's actually a really good platform for testing. It's a really good platform for testing, apart from the occasional like lags and stuff like that. The only big blemish on DB is specifically the fact that on DB, you get a lot of fucking people that are just really stupid. You get the trolls and all that stuff. And the trolls are the problem. But the thing is, an auto sim lends itself well to trolls trolling you, because you can't just continue a duel and ignore the troll, because it is a manual platform. That's the issue. And I don't appreciate people dogpiling on this drama with no knowledge or no experience of playing on the platform. And this is not, I'm not knocking Nova or whatever, and I'm not like, oh, Coder's got beef with Nova or whatever. I like Nova. She's great. She's a good friend of mine. I don't appreciate the dogpiling. Miwa said this. She said, I'll never stop saying it. In any game with a chat function, it is on the devs to make sure that bad behavior isn't tolerated. You can't control people's actions, but you can't control the systems that hold them accountable. If devs don't take it seriously, then players won't either.
Okay, Microsoft slash UK government.
That is the correct take. I don't like this take. Why would anyone use DB? Any sim with a chat function's a disaster. Don't like this take. I like this.
That's anti-free speech talking.
Okay, this is the mechanics of how
I don't
DB
agree,
functions.
actually.
Instead of directing hate at the platform, at DB or whatever, you should direct your criticism towards the people that are in the position and have the power to change what needs to be changed in order to streamline a proper way to use the mechanisms of the website. And another thing,
The consequences of freedom should be allowed and punishable, not disabled and prevented outright.
And whatnot, bring new rules to the website and all that stuff. Genuinely, and I know that my videos probably don't give DB the best reputation, because I'm constantly dealing with the fucking dumbasses, you know what I'm saying? However,
You do it for the content.
keep in mind, like, stuff
course-
like this happens.
of course you're gonna
on
prioritize
less than
showing those kinds of
5%
stuff.
Judge calls. And more often than not, the judge calls are the same people. It's the same.
You think the news is
specific
gonna
people
post
that
about
are constantly problematic.
how
It
nice
is
the
always
neighborhood
same
in
morals.
Philadelphia
So
is right
what we're
now?
gonna do
No,
is I'm
they're gonna
gonna
talk
create
about
a VC
the
with Marshy
latest
and Dyer.
fucking murder that
We're gonna
happened
have a discussion about it.
last
Who's Marshy, by the way?
millisecond
So
ago.
Marshy is one of the head admins of Dueling Book. I'm gonna be so real. Marshy is like the head admin of Dueling Book, bro. Marshy is the person that does the most for DB. DB would be way worse than it is right now if not for Marshy. Marshy is the goat. Genuine. But okay, so Dyer, I said to you that I did have some choice words for you. I think that genuinely, and I've said this to you off stream, but I'll say it here too. I think that you probably shouldn't have just gone like, yo, Twitter, look, they allow slurs on DB or whatever. I genuinely think that you should have reported it, maybe even DM'd me or something like that, because this is the kind of thing that I don't think should have been exploded as much as it did, because the reason why this exploded is because people love to just dogpile. And I don't think it's fair that a lot of the people that got dogpiled on got dogpiled on. To give you a big thing that did happen, and I can tell you guys this from behind the curtains here, you had posted, hey, if you want to report the judge or the player or whatever, here's the place to report them. I don't know if you know this, but we got like fucking
Understandable that you don't think this is the correct choice, but this is the human choice to make in this situation. I'm just saying.
And like, I don't think that a lot of the judges needed to fucking
I don't
be dealing with that. I'm
usually
gonna
like
be
to
so
fault people
no
for
hate to
being
you,
human.
Dyer. I'm gonna be so real. I do not think that you posted this to be like, hey, if this happens to you, you could use the forums or whatever. I think that you posted this because you were like, hey, this thing happened, Twitter, look. I think you did the content creator thing of like, oh, this thing happened, people will click on this. So I think that there was a part of it that was that, because you're known to do that, Tyler. you are known to do that. If something was to happen, I can assure you, if you take it to the forums, it will be handled. We have judges that literally check the forums on the day. It will get handled. Y'all have the floor. So, for context, chat, for anyone that doesn't know who Marshy is the pink horse, okay? Marshy is, for lack of a better term, like the most active head judge on YouTube. Their gold name, and they genuinely kick ass. DB would not be what it is without Marshy. Dyer wanted to hop in and talk about some stuff, so I mean, I guess, Dyer, you have the floor, by all means. Oh, give me 1 second. Holy fuck. Pause. My audio settings are incorrect. My audio settings are wrong. Okay, you guys are now coming through the correct sound channels. Okay, you may proceed.
I'll kick things off by saying, Coder, I've been kind of listening off and on to what you've been, talking about with the situation, and I feel like you've done a really good job of sort of explaining the situation more so from the judge's perspective. I think a lot of people are looking...
Coder sounds like
really
a fucking...
into the
not
situation,
Coder. Dyer sounds like a fucking snake oil peddler right now.
Familiar with how DB operates, or
God,
sort of
the wording of the... I've been listening, and you're doing so good right now.
Why did
it reminds me of Professor Dave Explains videos regarding the stupid guy who really hates evolution theory as a field of science.
Obviously, the rule exists specifically because for every call we get where someone calls someone a slur, we get 50 calls where someone calls someone a dude, and then a player's pausing the duel for being called a dude. You know what I mean? And it's like, there's no one rule that you can make that is just blanket gonna cover everything. Obviously, slurs aren't okay, but objectively, I think it is better to have a rule that lets the 50 duels where some guy calls someone a noob continue, whereas, the drawback is that you get a bad situation if someone calls someone a slur or whatever, but then, it should
in the heat of the moment, people usually do act their most human.
Which rule was more important to enforce, and just enforced the lesser important one, if that makes sense.
On top of that as well, I also want to add, DB judge calls typically take way longer than judge calls that you would find at a real-life event. At a real-life event, we don't have logs that we're going through, we don't have, trying to... I'm not going to say, not trying to get both sides, but we don't want people to be sitting around for an hour and a half waiting on a judge for something that you can just report on the forums, and we'll take it.
I'm just going to address what one person said in chat. Do I get the same penalty for calling someone a noob as calling them a slur? No, obviously not. You call someone a noob,
absolutely.
More often than not, unless you do it repeatedly, I'm probably giving you a be nice smile, move on with the duel. I'm probably not even giving a warning for calling someone a noob, unless you're doing it, like, a lot. I think that this is the big thing that needs to be understood, is that if you call someone a slur, you get frozen for harassment. The judge in this call didn't do it because they misunderstood the way the rule was intended to be applied.
Just something I wanted to say off of what you guys said a little earlier. I do not blame the judge for giving me a warning for AFKing or for giving me a game losses. The game losses especially, I was in the wrong there. Like, I knew, like, oh, okay, I guess I'm just getting a game loss, but, like, I wanted to discuss this with the judge. That was more important to me than, like, the fucking internet points. As for the AFK, it was just a warning, so, like, it didn't really matter. Like, I do agree that it shouldn't have been, like, the slur usage should have been addressed first before that, but whatever.
For sure, yeah.
I think the only, like, misconduct they had towards you was specifically kind of stonewalling, but that's beside them.
Yeah, that's not a major issue. I don't really care about that.
Yeah, and I'll definitely address the slur and the punishment in a second. All I'm trying to do is trying to establish some context and make sure that we understand what the real issue is. I've been looking at this situation for almost 8 hours now, so I've seen a lot of comments.
Yeah, we've all been
time trying to digest this.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
that's an interesting day.
Yeah, I didn't. Let's just say I didn't really get any work done today. So, the other thing I want to talk about, the other thing I think people are hyper focusing on is, well, why didn't the judge grant an appeal? I think Coder sort of addressed that quite well. Is usually
there was nothing
don't
to
grant
appeal
appeals for situations where the player is saying my opponent didn't get a harsh enough penalty. And the reason why is because I'm going to be honest with you, chat. 99% of you think that when you're dueling, that your opponent just needs to get the harshest penalty possible.
I'm guilty of this too, even in person. I've had situations, right, where people have complained to me. Like, sometimes I think calls on DB, right, where a player will make an illegal play, and then their opponent won't catch it, and then they'll both continue, and I'll give both a warning. And then people in chat will go, well, why? This one player made the mistake, not the other player. Why are they getting the same punishment? And it's like, well, because that's how the rules work. And the reality at the end of the day is that the judges understand the way the rules work, at least they should, understand the way the rules work better than the players. The players in the moment oftentimes always default to they should get a game loss. Every single time. It's always a game loss. They should always get banned. They should always get frozen. You guys see it constantly, and you guys meme it constantly, even when I take calls. The amount of times where I'll join a call, and one player goes, my opponent is cheating. My opponent cheated. When the reality of it is, the opponent accidentally drew 2 cards off an effect because he thought he was supposed to draw 2, and instead was only supposed to draw 1. And it's like, well, he didn't cheat. He made a mistake. We'll just correct it, and it's fine. But you always get, like, most players, they just default to the worst possible thing.
You also have to understand as well that the whole point of a judge being there in that call is to be like an impartial third party looking at the situation. They have not seen what has gone on in the duel. They are not playing. They have nothing to do with it. They're just trying to make a ruling so that we can find a way to get the game to move on. And so sometimes as a result, that does mean that the judge is going to decide that, okay, yeah, sure, maybe technically I could argue my opponent did this thing that may warrant, you know, a game loss or a freeze or whatever. But as a judge, in my, you know, professional judgment, I don't think that such a harsh penalty is necessary. I think that we can give a lesser penalty. They are more aware of the rules and the penalties than you are. You are very likely to be biased against your opponent. You want your opponent to get the game lost. You want your opponent to get the freeze. That helps you. That gives you the magic internet points.
Would like to say, obviously, I knew all this. I watched Coder. I know that you can't appeal for a higher thing. I just didn't know what else to appeal because I knew, like, this isn't right. And I have seen, like, in the past, Coder said, like, I'm going to deny this appeal. And then later on, after talking to the murder, like, actually, you know what? I will give it. You just, like, make the decision. So I
definitely got that.
Something like that would happen. So that's why I tried it, because, like, I know typically it doesn't, but I thought, maybe this will be like, oh, they're appealing, normally not supposed to, I'll get someone else just to check.
So the person in chat saying, I thought only gray judges could deny appeals. Gray judges can always deny appeals. Green judges can deny appeals on certain situations. So, like, a green judge can deny an appeal such as if there's a ruling and the player wants to appeal the ruling, if the gray judge has an official source that we recognize that confirms their ruling, they can deny if they have the official source, because there's no way a person taking the appeal is going to rule another way because we have the official source on hand. They can deny an appeal if there's, like, no other judges online, and typically they'll grant the appeal, ask, and then if no other judges come by for 10, 15 minutes, something like that, then the judge will go, I'm sorry, there's no one here to take the appeal, so we'll deny the appeal. Primary thing that green judges can deny an appeal for is denying an appeal where a player wants the opponent to get a punishment and they didn't get one. That's exactly what happened here. The player denied the appeal of granting an additional punishment when the judge has already made their judgment on it. Which is also a thing that would happen potentially at, like, a YCS or something like that. Typically at a YCS, if your opponent gets, like, if you call a judge for something and your opponent doesn't get any sort of punishment or whatever, and you go, I think they should get one, can I appeal for them to get a punishment? Typically, you're getting an unsportsmanlike conduct warning.
And I think we actually have it listed on our policies page, duelingbook.com/policies.
At this point, the speed doesn't matter. It really is just my gameplay that sucks right now.
Digital entertainment policies, and that being one of them, that we do
I may as well stick to the higher speed.
Whatever you want to call them, the right to deny appeals.
I'm used to playing in
because if you think about it, right, with dueling
you're intended to be playing in.
That is available 24/7, you're not always going to have a senior or a head judge available to take that appeal. That's why that's there. Let's get to the meat and potatoes. The appetite is over. The slur, right? Think that what happened is I'm going to take the blame. I'm more than happy to accept fault for that. This was a miscommunication on my part, or the team's part, of communicating what exactly is our policy when it comes to addressing slurs. I personally did not think, when I wrote that, because I'm the one that actually wrote that harassment definition that's right there. When I wrote that, I didn't see any like room for mythic. Actually, Coder brought it up to me this morning and said, "Hey, the people are reading it this way," and I went, "That's impossible. There's no way that people are misinterpreting that." And then I reread it through a different lens and went, "Oh, that's how people are reading it." So that is on me for miscommunicating.
So to clarify, what Marshy means here is that people are reading this rule as repeated use of offensive language, or use of slurs, or threatening violence get you a freeze. People were reading it as repeated use of offensive language, or repeated use of slurs, or repeated use of threatening physical violence and all that stuff. It was basically being read as repeated use of any of those things, rather than repeated use of offensive language or one instance of the other things. And that is why the judge ruled the way that they did, was specifically because they had read these rules incorrectly. And also, it's not once per duel or something like that or whatever. It's more so just operating on a, you do a thing wrong, you no offenses or whatever, we'll give you a warning, we'll let you know, hey, you can't be doing that shit or whatever, and we put a warning on their account. And that's the thing that we do a lot. A lot of times you hear me do it oftentimes when I'm in a duel. I'll oftentimes say, I'm gonna leave a warning on their account. And the thing that the judge failed to do for this call was check the user's history, because that user did have a history that was pretty extensive, and I don't think that they would have let that slide in any way, shape, or form if they had checked their history. Not that they should have let it slide at all, but I think that if they had checked the history, they would have handled it correctly, for sure.
And on top of that as well, something I want to talk about is, I know that it was kind of mentioned briefly before, but a lot of this stuff comes with experience. When you're a brand new judge, you want to make sure that you are doing things exactly as you were taught how to do it, which is to look at the rules, look at the policy docs, and you're going to follow that to the letter. I actually was remembering an example as I was coming home from work. I remember a duel back all the way in 2020, actually. You were in a duel, and I took your judge call. It was over a ruling issue. You had linked your opponent the database ruling, and I came in, and I set your opponent to beginner, even though I was like, well, does it really warrant a beginner? Because then we had the policy, the rule, if you link your opponent the official rule, then you have to set them to beginner.
And so people were just applying that blindly without thinking about the idea behind the rule, and that was just a thing that we did a lot. I mean, fuck, I've been a judge on TV for, 7 years now? 7 years? I've done that. I've issued penalties or whatever that I didn't agree with, specifically because that was what the rules said to do,
A lot of that outside thinking.
God, was 6-7 already a meme when this drama was around?
On DD for, basically the same amount of time as you, Coder, 6-7 years, and, over time, you just start going with your judgment. You don't follow the rules exactly as they're written, you just think about, okay, how do I think is the best way to handle this, and you do it. This judge has been a judge on DB for less than a year. She made a ruling based on how she understood the rules to be, and again, that is on us for miscommunicating. That is a failure on us, on a training side, and on a communication side. I think another thing as well to understand is, when it comes to how should Dueling Book handle certain things, I know there's sort of a reputation that Dueling Book may be kind of lenient in a lot of cases. We're not a monolith. Not all judges on Dueling Book are a monolith. A lot of judges do disagree with some of the ways that we handle things. I mean, there's a lot going on internally on the reasons for that. We're working on doing better. Have already started the open discussions in the judge chat. We want to put together this round table where we sort of talk about the philosophies of Dueling Book and what changes we can make and try to make it a more positive experience for everyone.
Something I would also like to say, off of you guys saying, a judge is more flexible with rules with more experience. Players, as they are more accustomed to DB, expect that flexibility from a judge. Because, I didn't know that was, a judge in their first year. I have been playing on DB for, 6 or 7 years. I've had judges be like, okay, well, the letter of the law isn't the same as the spirit of the law, blah blah blah, which is why I act in that way. It's Judge, I understand what the rule says, but this is not what it intends to do, which is why I was fighting on that.
One thing that someone is saying in chat that I think is important to bring up is someone saying, what bugs me is that Dyer is a known community member, so they were able to speak out and be heard, but how many cases have there been of someone saying a slur and not getting punished for it that went unreported? And the big thing is, this is all causing
It was heard because
a lot of people
she was heard because she used the nuclear option of going to Twitter.
But the reality of it is, like, even if Dyer went after the fact, like after the call, after getting given the loss, everything, if Dyer went and was like, my opponent said a slur, and
Dueling Book isn't like Microsoft or anything like that, but
when there's like
Microsoft and other things,
something like that happens, it's relayed to the head judges. So
they like to do this thing where they ignore the problem unless they can't really ignore it anymore.
To pass judgment on an appeal that has to do with them, or like a forum post that has to do with them.
Because solving problems wastes resources.
I can't go into the forums and handle my own forum complaint or whatever. If I do that, I lose judge roll instantly.
When a party member dies, it wastes time and resources trying to revive them, when you could just continue dogpiling on your opponent. That's the same philosophy most companies like to employ on
who already have some sort of negative impression.
their decision-making on.
And they're just, like, trying to find any other reason to be like, see, this is why I said this is why I said that. We have a lot of safeguards in place, like you said. Judges can't handle reports against.
And here, at least,
a senior judge
Coder and friends are taking the opportunity to be communicative, which any other company would not until you've blown up one of their fucking factory pipes.
But a senior judge or higher has to be the one that says approve, yes, sign off.
Yeah, it gets moved. So yeah, exactly. So the lower judges will handle the form thing, but then they'll move it over so that the seniors can approve it. Nothing happens without the seniors' approval. Another thing that someone is asking here, could they implement an auto mod type thing or filter on the chat? Person does say a slur, it gets caught, and they get the punishment. So, could they? Yes. Yes, they could. The people in charge of Dueling Book, they absolutely could. And we have been asking for them to do that for a very, very long time. But they don't do it. That's it. I will not say more on this matter.
I'll add a little bit of context to that as well. Because, you introduced me as,
they don't. There's a lot of things they can do to make Dueling Book so much better.
Right, I'm effectively on
but they don't.
Steven in terms of authority, but there's only one developer.
It's understandable.
Steven.
Yeah,
So,
it's like a small indie company type thing, and it's non-profit.
Safe, positive environment, but the limits are his, right? There's a lot of behind the scenes on that. Okay.
I think that is something you guys said earlier about how there's a lot of distrust of DB judges and stuff. I understand that there is safeguards in place now, but I do remember back in 2019, 2020, there were big issues with power trippy judges and stuff. So
there were, and they would get removed. Yeah. They got removed.
Yeah. I'm not saying they're still there, but I'm saying that's why I just have an inherent suspicion of judges when they start defending. What happened made me be like, oh, is this another case of a new power tripping judge? At the end, I was a little bitchy. With I thought you. I shouldn't have said that. I was salty. I'm like, oh, great, we got another one of these people. Obviously, I don't know how the internal things are. I personally would hope this would be a note on their judging portfolio or whatever. If a future issue comes up with similar things, that it's not forgotten that this happened with them.
Yeah, I can kind of weigh in on that. Every judge has made a mistake at some point. We all follow the rules, to the letter. We don't think about things super judgmentally when we're just first starting off. So we are human, right? We are actively participating in the judge chat. We can see if there are any concerning patterns with judges. We've seen concerning patterns with judges before. If it gets to a certain point where we realize they don't want to learn from their mistakes, then they do certainly get removed. We've had that happen before. I'm sure it will happen again in the future.
Yeah, we have a special thing called Demotion Tuesdays, and it's Tuesday today, so
it's actually Sunday.
Wait, was it Demotion Sunday? Oh, damn! Goes to show how little I know. Chat, do we have any questions for Marshy here, or anything that you guys would specifically want to have happen, like to better Dueling Book. Because I think the big reality of it is that a lot of people that are reporting don't even fucking play on DB. So a lot of people don't even have a horse in the race. You know what I mean? Know what I mean?
That's just Yu-Gi-Oh players, isn't it?
Specifically.
I mean, from my perspective, my biggest issue with Dueling Book is the lack of enforcement on the no slur, no blah 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 stuff. It does obviously we've said it is a small portion of it, but they are a very vocal small portion. And
we've been very vocal in the judge chat about wanting to fix that, so that's gonna happen probably.
Good.
If I start on Dueling Book and I didn't know you had to report on the forums, it feels like I would just be confused about what to do and how to deal with the situation. On that note, I'm gonna throw everyone under the bus. Did any of y'all that play DB read the DB rules before hopping into a game? If your answer is no, it's your fault. Sorry. The website has rules, you should probably read them before you jump into a game. And if you read them, you would know that you can report on the forums.
Oh my god, so much yes.
And that's the reality of it.
I do think making the forums more easily accessible or knowledgeable might be a better idea. I don't really agree with you do that. Maybe just having it always be in the top right there's a large enough forum button where it's not distracting from the game, but it is always there. Because right now it's on the homepage, on the main menu, but most people spend the time on DB in a tool, whereas they're not really going to see it. I bet half of the people here didn't even know the DB forums existed before today. I only know they exist because of you.
Yeah, it's a little way down there in the list of stuff, I agree. It should probably be way higher. Honestly, forums should probably replace tournaments, I'm not gonna lie. Tournaments should not be this high.
And I do agree, I think having a way to report should be directly on the site, but if we are, forced to go to forum, making the forum more accessible is ideal. But obviously,
I agree.
Reporting directly on the site would be just solve the issue.
I think a big thing about DB as well is that a lot of people seem to be asking for automate this, automate that, automate this, automate that. DB is a website that is held together by duct tape and glue sticks. The website used to be in Flash and now has been transferred over to HTML and all that stuff. There's a lot of stuff on DB that I'm convinced if something was attempted to be automated or whatever, it would likely
an old ass site.
Issues on the website and stuff like that. The website just isn't fantastic. A lot of DB
it was made because some college dudes wanted
people that are taking care of the website, and it's all done
do
by
something about Yu-Gi-Oh online.
We get a lot of suggestions all the time from users about, I would like to see this implemented on DB, I would like to see that implemented. Again, we are limited by one guy. And so I'm sure a lot of these suggestions we would love to implement. It's just the limits are...
Is there anything else that we need to go over? Because we've been talking about this for 2 hours now. Is there anything else to go over here?
I do not believe so. I think I've said everything I want to say. I've made my points and perspective on the situation very clear, and I feel I hope at least, we had a very respectful conversation. I'm sorry if I came off as disrespectful towards either of you.
Yeah, no worries. I think this was a great conversation. I personally took no offense to anything that you said. I think that you were a wonderful chatter, a wonderful user, and I appreciate you bringing this up to our attention.
I love you, and I want the community to improve. The community can be good. It's just we do have a lot of bad actors, and I want to part of weeding out those bad actors to let us be. Yeah, I know we can be.
I think a big thing is I think that people need to just stop shitting on DB, because while DB is a buggy mess every now and again, or whatever, fairly often, I'll be real, it's a buggy mess fairly often, and there are some bad actors on the website, but ultimately the reason why the website has continued to thrive as it has throughout the years is specifically because it is the best website to test. All the top players play on here, and if you invest even a little bit of time onto playing ranked on DB, the moment you get out of low ranked, you start playing against the actual real fucking people, and then you start playing against YCS top players and all that stuff for everything. So it is a really fantastic place to test. So I just would like that people stop shitting on DB all the damn time because of a handful of shitty bad actors that are on the platform. And we try our best to get rid of them. We try. I freeze them constantly. You see the streams. I'm freezing these people constantly, man. Marshy, can you speak on, because a lot of people seem to be really upset that no action was taken against the judge that was in the call.
It's a leadership thing. It's a human development thing. When you're working in the corporate world, if one of your juniors messes up, right? You have to take a leadership role, and you don't just decide, hey, I'm going to punish you because you did this thing, right? Every opportunity is a learning opportunity. That's the world that we're growing up into, okay? When you just start punishing people for mistakes that they make, then you're not going to keep people around for very long. We looked at this as a learning opportunity for the judge. You know, they recognized their mistake. Now, if the judge didn't recognize their mistake, and they said, no, I think what I did was 100% correct, and I would do it again, then yes, that's problematic. And we would have to be looking at potential termination for that. But when the judge recognizes, look, I made a mistake, I apologize, I will do better next time, that's just a learning opportunity.
I don't think they should be removed, assuming, as you said, they were like recognizing that they did make a mistake. I simply wanted to make sure, when I said people should report them,
people love throwing people into the fire.
Like, so if something does happen in the future,
especially women with black cats.
It's important that people are allowed to grow and learn from their mistakes, but I do think it's important that we try to stop repeated behavior, because people can try and improve, but if they are constantly making the same mistakes, I do think there should be severe consequences.
This is something that we monitor, and if we start seeing a concerning pattern, we will address it at that time. For now, it's a good learning opportunity, and looking forward to how they develop in the future.
Also, as much as I understand why Dyer took it to Twitter and all this stuff, and as much as I understand it's damn near impossible to get this to happen, I would appreciate it if the chat could agree to be less mob-y about stuff like that, dude. Like, mass reporting, the one issue, like, the website is small enough. If one person reports it, it's gonna get seen by the people that need to see it. The 35 fucking reports that came in the span of an hour were not necessary. They were absolutely not necessary. Y'all can put the pitchforks down. We can just have a conversation about it.
Yeah, the 35 reports in an hour was excessive, but again, you know, it's to be expected with a situation like this with an influencer as well known as Dyer. So it's not unexpected, but to your point, yeah, like I said, we are people. We're not a bunch of robots. We see this kind of stuff. Don't worry, guys.
Yeah, I think that's about it. That's about everything we have to talk about, right? Everyone, be nice, smile. Thank you, Marshy, for coming on. Thank you for Dyer for coming on to talk about this. But I think overall, the whole situation has been resolved perfectly fine, honestly. Like, it's been resolved fine. The person in question has been removed. The judge in the situation has been spoken to and explained why they made a mistake and what their mistake was. And they won't make it again, hopefully. I mean, if they make it again, they're probably not going to be sticking around for very long. And that's all you can really expect to have happen from a situation like this. We have to all give each other a little bit more grace and leniency and understand the mistake.
Very true. Yeah, regarding the topic of corporate bullcrappery, Minecraft YouTube celebrity Sunday made a server that's straight up fucking pay to win, and obviously the primary player base is his audience, and his audience are a bunch of children. He's literally making children play gacha games. And it wasn't until nuclear actions were taken, such as hacking and all those other stuff, that they were finally forced. And I do mean forced. I should probably stop now. To change how the server worked. And in the video where he addresses the changes and stuff, he says, I don't have a problem with people wanting things to change for the better. My problem is people go to such extremes. And my response to that is, I fucking wonder why. It's almost as if if we don't go to such extremes, you just wouldn't fucking listen. And then you wonder why people go to such extremes. Maybe if you were willing to listen to begin with, people like these wouldn't exist. Behavior like that wouldn't happen towards you guys, and you wouldn't have to deal with such fallout. But as it stands, if you want change to happen, you have to fucking blow up chemical plants. Otherwise, it'll just be ignored. Oh, by the way, that's the title of an actual book. It's great. You should go read it. I do not believe most of the things being mentioned in that book are actionable to anyone other than Elon Musk and other billionaires, but at the very least, it's a good book to read and be depressed about how hard it is to change society. Because society makes it really hard. People in power create laws to make sure they stay in power. Makes me wish we were playing Tetris Fever sometimes, where you can trigger a special ability where you can only where you drop where there's a temporary point thing you can power up you can take where the only Minos you get are one tile large Minos rather than the usual 4-tile size. They're all just periods. You know, you use those to burn out singles and clean up your board after you get fucking bombarded with Z's and S's. As classic Tetris oft loves to do. Oops, that was close. Why am I so good? I'm having...